In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, surrounded by nothing but gray water and invisible enemies, a British commander realized something was terribly wrong. Not because of what his sonar detected, but because of what was floating on the surface. Bread, vegetable scraps, ordinary trash. In a war defined by steel, sonar, and explosives, it was garbage that would change everything. By early 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had reached a breaking point. This was not a battle of dramatic landings or famous generals. It was a slow, grinding struggle measured in tonnage, fuel, and time. Every ship that failed to reach Britain meant less food, less oil, fewer weapons, and fewer chances to survive the war. German submarines, known as U-boats, prowled the Atlantic with terrifying efficiency. They did not need to defeat the Royal Navy outright. They only needed to sink merchant ships faster than the Allies could replace them. And for a time, they succeeded. British cities depended on overseas supply lines that stretched thousands of miles. Grain from North America, fuel from the Caribbean. Troops and equipment are moving constantly across the ocean. Every convoy was a lifeline, and every convoy was hunted. German Admiral Karl Dönitz believed submarines were the decisive weapon of the war. He organized them into coordinated attack groups called wolfpacks. Instead of a single submarine stalking a convoy alone, multiple U-boats would converge at night, striking from different angles, overwhelming escorts designed to fight isolated attackers. The results were devastating. In just the first months of 1943, Allied losses climbed at a rate that alarmed even the most hardened planners. Ships burned, crews froze in the water. Survivors were rescued only to watch the next convoy sail out under the same threat. British escort crews lived with constant frustration. They could hear submarines beneath them. They could chase sonar contacts for hours, but actually killing a U-boat was another matter entirely. Anti-submarine warfare at the time relied on sonar, known then as ASDIC, and depth charges. Sonar could detect a submerged submarine under good conditions, but only within a limited range. Depth charges had to be dropped almost directly above the target, and the moment a surface ship passed overhead, it lost contact, creating a blind spot that submarines exploited again and again. German U-boats were built for exactly this kind of fight. They could dive deep, turn sharply, and run silently on electric motors. Their commanders were trained to evade, not fight. Once detected, the goal was simple: disappear. British commanders knew the problem. They wrote about it openly. They could find submarines, but they could not reliably destroy them. The ocean was too large, the weapons too imprecise, and the enemy too disciplined. New technologies were introduced: improved sonar, new weapons like the Hedgehog mortar, which fired multiple explosives ahead of the ship instead of behind it. Coordinated escort groups trained to attack together. These improvements helped, but they did not solve the core issue. Submarines still controlled the terms of engagement. From the German perspective, the war at sea was going well. U-boat commanders developed confidence, sometimes arrogance. They studied Allied tactics closely. British escorts, they believed, followed doctrine rigidly. Once those patterns were understood, evasion became a routine practice. German training manuals emphasized standard responses to detection: dive deep, turn perpendicular, reduce noise, wait patiently while the escorts wasted their depth charges. It worked often enough to become an unquestioned truth. The irony was that this discipline, this consistency, was creating patterns of its own. But no one on the German side recognized that yet, and no one on the British side knew how to exploit it. Not until an observation made thousands of miles away, in a completely different ocean, by someone who was not trained to fight submarines at all. The USS Barb was an American submarine operating in the Pacific. Its mission had nothing to do with the Atlantic War, but the problems it faced were eerily similar. Enemy escorts reacted to its presence in ways that were predictable but puzzling. A sailor assigned to galley duty noticed something strange. Every time food waste was disposed of, enemy ships altered course, not randomly, but deliberately, as if they were reading something written on the surface of the sea. The waste disposal system ejected garbage at depth, but not everything sank. Some floated, some spread, some lingered. The sailor paid attention. He connected timing with behavior, and he reported it to his commanding officer. At first, the idea sounded absurd, but experiments proved otherwise. Floating debris could reveal heading, speed, and even depth changes. From the air or a periscope, it was a trail. And if a trail could reveal truth, it could also create lies. What followed was a radical shift in thinking. Instead of hiding all traces, submarines could deliberately create false ones. Garbage could become a weapon, not by its substance, but by the assumptions it triggered. In combat, the tactic worked immediately. Enemy escorts attacked debris fields with confidence, believing they had found the submarine's escape route. Meanwhile, the real submarine slipped away, repositioned, and struck again. Reports were written, intelligence officers took notice, and eventually the idea crossed the Atlantic. When British commanders received the information, many were skeptical. It seemed too simple, too improvised, almost insulting to years of formal doctrine. But the Battle of the Atlantic was being lost, and desperation opens minds. Frederic John Walker was one of the Royal Navy's most aggressive anti-submarine commanders. He was experienced, relentless, and deeply frustrated by the limits of existing tactics. He had chased countless contacts that vanished into nothing. When Walker read about the use of debris as deception, he did not dismiss it. He recognized something familiar, enemy behavior driven by expectation. Walker understood that submarines were not just machines, they were crews following rules, and rules could be manipulated. He ordered his ships to prepare floating debris, not as waste, but as bait. In the North Atlantic, Walker's escort group encountered multiple submarines operating together. This was the most dangerous scenario possible, a coordinated wolfpack preparing to strike a convoy. Instead of charging directly at sonar contacts, Walker altered the script. Debris was released in visible quantities. His ships appeared to pursue it aggressively, then subtly changed course. German commanders observed exactly what they expected to see, escorts committing to a chase. They responded with textbook evasion, deep dives, silent running, waiting. But this time, the British were not fooled. Using improved sonar and coordinated positioning, Walker's ships attacked submarines that believed they were safe. Weapons detonated at depths German crews thought unreachable. One submarine was destroyed outright. Others dove deeper, making themselves slower, blind, and predictable. The escorts closed in. In just over an hour, multiple submarines were destroyed, a wolf pack ceased to exist, and the convoy passed through unharmed. It was not luck. It was not superior firepower alone. It was understanding how the enemy thought and using that understanding against them. The implications were enormous. Reports spread quickly. New tactical bulletins were issued. Escort commanders were trained to use deception deliberately, not incidentally. The numbers told the story. Submarine losses skyrocketed. German confidence collapsed.
Admiral Donitz would later refer to this period as a catastrophe. U-boats withdrew from key routes. The balance of the Atlantic shifted. The Allies would never again face the same level of existential threat from submarine warfare. The irony was painful. The innovation that helped save thousands of lives came not from a laboratory or a senior officer, but from an enlisted sailor paying attention to trash. Walker himself paid a heavy price. Years of relentless operations took their toll. He did not live to see the war's end, but his methods endured. Modern naval warfare still relies on deception, false signatures, decoys, simulated targets. The principle remains unchanged. Control what the enemy believes. A single weapon or invention did not win the Battle of the Atlantic. It was won by observation, adaptability, and the courage to question assumptions. In a war defined by technology, one of its turning points began with garbage floating on the sea. And that is the uncomfortable truth of history. Sometimes the most powerful ideas come from the things everyone else ignores.